Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Starting with the name of Allah for the next chapter of the class ninth, the first chapter of the class ninth, cells and tissues. In the previous eighth class, you learned three chapters. Chapter number one, Introduction to Biology. Chapter number two, Solving a Biological Problem, and chapter three, Biodiversity. Now, the chapter four is the first chapter of your class ninth, cells and tissues. So, I'm going to start the lecture, the chapter number 4, cells and tissues. First of all, what is cell? Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all the living organisms. In the junior classes, you define the cell as the basic unit of life, just the basic unit of life. But in biology, in the senior classes, you will define the cell as the basic structural and functional unit of all living organisms. Structural means that cells form the structure of the living body, and functional means that all the functions are performed by the cell. So, cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living organisms. Okay, what are on the basis of cell? There are two types of organisms: unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms, which are made up of single cell, are called the unicellular organisms, like amoeba, like euglena, like bacteria, like yeast, etc. And those organisms which are made up of more than one cells are called multicellular organisms, like maize, like mango, like all the plants, like all the animals. Unicellular organisms are those organisms which are made up of single cell, while multicellular organisms are those organisms which are made up of many cells. Okay, the next topic is the microscope. Definitely, when we study the cells and tissues, so we use an instrument which is used to study these cells and tissues. So, for the easy study of cells and tissues, an instrument is used by the scientist which is known as microscope. Clear? First of all, what is microscopy? The use of microscope to observe minute things is called microscopy. The use of microscope to observe minute things is called microscopy. And the definition of microscope is an instrument used for the observation of those things which we cannot see with our naked eye, and we see them or we study them with the help of an instrument which is known as microscope. When was the microscope discovered? So, the discovery of microscope is the first microscope was developed by Zacharias Janssen in Holland in 1595. The first microscope was developed by Zacharias in Holland in 1595, and it was simply a tube with the lenses at each end. Its magnification ranged from 3x to 9x. Its magnification was from 3x, which was very less magnification, and it was very simple microscope, a simple tube on the both ends of which lenses were present, and the Jensen observed the things in this simple tube like microscope. Then the Anton van Leeuwenhoek was another scientist. His time period was from 1632 to 1723, and he discovered the much better microscope and observed small organisms under it. The magnification power of his microscope was more than 250x. He is considered to be the first microscopist. Clear है सही है ना? So, when we study the cells and the tissues, so cell is the basic unit of life, cell is a function and structural unit of life, because cell forms the structure of the living body and it performs all the functions of the living body. That's why cell is known as the basic structure and functional unit of the living body. When we study these cells in detail, we use an instrument which helps us to study them easy, and this instrument is known as microscope. Micro means small and scope means to view. So, microscope is an instrument which is used to observe, to see, to study the very small organism, very minute organism. On the basis of cell, there are two types of organisms on the earth: the unicellular organism, which are made up of one cell, and the multicellular organism, which are made up of many cells. Now, the microscopy. The use of microscope to observe minute things is called microscopy. What do you mean by microscopy? That when we use a microscope to study the things is known as microscopy. Then we discuss the discovery of the microscope, that it was simple, produced by the Zacharias Janssen in 1595 and then the much better microscope was discovered by Anton van Leeuwenhoek in Anton van Leeuwenhoek, which magnification power was 250x. Now, when we study the things in the microscope, the two definitions are there. The two things are there. The first one is a magnification, and the second one is the resolution. What is magnification? Magnification, in simple words, we can say that magnify karna, magnification. Whenever we see the things in the microscope and it give us the large image from its original size, it means that it enlarges the things which we study. The things which we study in the microscope are known as specimens or samples, etc. क्लियर। तो जब अगर इन केस हम माइक्रोस्कोप में कोई माइन्यूट ऑर्गेनिज्म, कोई माइन्यूट सैंपल रखते हैं जिसकी हमने स्टडी करनी है, अगर वो हमें माइक्रोस्कोप उसके ओरिजिनल साइज से बहुत बड़ा करके दिखाई दे, दिस इज नोन एज द मैग्निफिकेशन पावर ऑफ अ माइक्रोस्कोप। क्लियर। when the microscope enlarge the things from its original size is known as magnification power. Example, a magnification power of light microscope is 1500x. Clear? What is the resolution? The capacity of a microscope to differentiate between two close objects is called resolution. Whenever the two things are placed in close proximity, when they are very close with each other, and we can't differentiate the two things separately, but microscope give us the differentiation between these two things, this is known as resolution power of a microscope. मतलब दो चीज़ों, अगर दो चीज़ें दो एक दूसरे के बहुत ज़्यादा करीब पड़ी है, they are in the close proximity with each other, and when the microscope give us the idea or it give us the differentiation between that they are separate things and they are placed separate from each other, this power of microscope is known as resolution power. For example, the human eye can differentiate between 2 points at least zero point 0.1 millimeter apart. This is called resolution power of human eye, and the resolution power of the light microscope is zero point 0.2 micrometer. Clear that whenever, what is magnification? The magnification means whenever we see the things in the microscope and microscope give us the enlarged image, then its original size is known as magnification power of microscope. And whenever the microscope differentiate between two close objects is called the resolution power of microscope. So the resolution of the human eye is zero point 0.1 millimeter apart. When the things are placed in close proximity, at least zero point 0.0 millimeter apart, our eye can differentiate them, while the resolution power of the light microscope is zero point 0.2 micrometer. Clear? So the microscope is an instrument which is used to see the very minute things or very small things. Clear? There are two types of microscope. One is the light microscope and another one is the electron microscope. Clear? The types of microscope, there are two types of microscope, the electron microscope and the light microscope. As its names इसके नाम से clear है that the type of microscope which use the light as a source is known as the light microscope, and the type of microscope which use a beam of electron to see the image clear is known as the electron microscope. So there are two types of microscope, the light microscope and the electron microscope. The microscope which use the light to see the objects clearly is called the light microscope, and the microscope which is used to see that which give us clear image with the help of electrons is known as electron microscope. So today we discussed the cell, the definition of the cell, the on the basis of cell, how many living organisms are there on the earth, the definition of the microscope, the microscopy, the resolution power and magnification power of the microscope, and discovery of microscope, and the types of microscope. Inshallah, in next lecture we will go into detail of the types of the microscope, that how they